We had to laugh recently. One of our new little cars, Fiona, got up to some surprising tricks, but she's so sweet that even Mr. Rumbelow couldn't be cross for long. The trouble arose, I think, because Fiona is so new and hasn't done much driving. You'd hardly believe this, but she didn't realize how important it is to keep all four wheels on the road. This is what happened. We were all in a holiday mood. The sun was shining, and Mr. Rumbelow had decorated the garage with flags for the town carnival. All the cars were busy, and Japonica was the most excited of them all. She was decked out with ribbons. She was going to take part in the carnival procession to advertise Top Gear motors. Fiona was not so excited about her day's work. 2 young men had hired her to go down to the motor race meeting. "What a bore," said Fiona, yawning. "Not my scene at all." "Wish I was going," said Bert, lifting his head out of Rattlewagon's bonnet for a moment. "See some excitement down there, Fiona, and some good driving." "You'll come back and astonish us all with new tricks," laughed Snoopy Sneer, not unkindly, because even he was fond of this light-hearted little car. The drive down was fun. The 2 young men, Dave and Pete, were real car enthusiasts, and they discussed motor racing all the way. They also managed to make Fiona go much faster than she thought she could. But there was one bit she didn't enjoy, coming down a steep hill. Hair-raising. Too much traffic, too steep, too fast. Then they arrived. Fiona had never seen such crowds and so many cars parked. But she was disappointed to find that she wasn't going to see the racing at all. Dave and Pete had to park her in a distant corner. Then they strode off to enjoy themselves. Fiona could hear the noise of the cars, and she could hear the crowds, but she couldn't see anything. Meanwhile, Dave and Pete had to push through the crowds to get a good spot on a corner. They could see all the excitement. Dave was particularly impressed by the way the cars came round the bends. "Look at them cornering," he said to Pete. "They practically drift round. Fantastic." "Wait till I get back to that little Fiona. I'll try it out on her." "Not your car, remember," said Pete cautiously. "Come on, let's go and get some hamburgers to eat off that stall." For hours, Dave and Pete watched the racing. Suddenly, it began to pour with rain, bucketing down. They decided to make a quick getaway before the crowds left. "Come on, my beauty," said Dave as he jumped into Fiona. "Now for some real driving." Fiona was pleased to be off. It had been dull in the car park. "We're not going back by the main road," said Dave. "I want some country lanes with plenty of bends." "Don't do anything daft," said Pete. "I've got a date tonight. I don't want to end up with a broken leg." "I'll be careful, don't worry. I just want to try that cornering. Get a bit of speed up." They were onto a corner quite suddenly. Full speed ahead. Dave braked sharply as they approached the bend. Then he accelerated hard as they came out of it. As her wheels began to spin, she could feel Dave skillfully keeping control so that she just drifted round with her tires screaming with the thrill of it. "We did it!" yelled Dave. "Now for the next corner. Here it comes!" Fiona was enjoying herself now. Yes, cornering like this was something she'd try again by herself. But Bert was not so pleased when Dave and Pete returned Fiona to the garage. She was covered in mud and quite exhausted. "She's not a Ferrari, you know," he growled at Dave and Pete. But Fiona was irrepressible. "What does mud matter when I can spin around corners like a racing car?" she laughed. That night, when all the cars were parked, Fiona described her day out. "And it's quite the best way of going round corners. I shall always do it now," she added. Japonica was doubtful. "Don't you feel that you are losing control?" she asked. "Doesn't sound very safe to me," I said. "I can't see Mr. Macintosh enjoying it." All the other cars laughed. They knew Mr. Macintosh. Fiona certainly had to be patient before she could try it again. For the next few days, all her jobs were on main roads with plenty of pedestrians and very few sharp bends. Then Mr. Rumbelow had an urgent call. A surveyor's vehicle had broken down, and he wanted a car quickly to go up to the aqueduct. There had been reports of a leak. "Now's my chance," cried Fiona with relief and excitement. "The road to the aqueduct is full of bends. I shall enjoy myself and surprise that surveyor." She tooted her horn as she sailed out of the garage. Bert shook his head in disbelief. "These young cars these days," he said, "always up to something. I wonder what she's got up her sleeve today." The surveyor soon found out. Cap-wow! Zoom! Every corner that Fiona came to, she hugged the bank and swung her back wheels round, just as Dave had made her. At the third corner, she suddenly felt her whole weight swing right over onto the near side. To her horror and surprise, she felt her two offside wheels come off the ground. The surveyor looked startled. "What on earth got into you? I thought we were going over for a moment," he said. Fiona told him about the motor race meeting and how Dave had driven her home, practicing on all the corners. "But this new way with the offside wheels off the ground is even more fun," said Fiona. The surveyor laughed. "Well, all right, I'm game," he said. "Come on, let's try a few more before we get there." At every corner, Fiona and the surveyor zoomed round at top speed, leaning over and bringing the wheels off the ground. Once or twice, even Fiona was alarmed. She felt that she might tip right over into the ditch. But the surveyor was not alarmed. "It's fun!" he shouted. "Why haven't I done it before? Come on, Fiona! One more go!" Bert was surprised when Fiona returned from her drive with the surveyor, quite exhausted, dusty, and muddy. "I thought you only went up to the aqueduct," he said. "What's been going on, Fiona?" he asked, trying to be stern. But Fiona's fluttering eyes always softened him. "Cornering," she said appealingly. "I was only practicing my cornering." "Well, let's clean you up and check you before Mr. Rumbelow sees you. And by the way, you're due out tomorrow to take a family with their new baby to a christening. So no fancy cornering then, if you don't mind." It was while Bert was giving Fiona a thorough overhaul that he discovered the state of her tires. "You ought to be ashamed of yourself," he exclaimed. "Have you seen your near-side tires? Practically torn to shreds. They both need new tires immediately. You can't go out on the road with them. You'd be a major road hazard. Fiona looked startled and abashed. Torn to shreds? She said, looking quite surprised. But I'm a new car. How can they be? I'll tell you how, Miss Fiona Folly, Bert said in a menacing tone. Your tyres are ruined because of your fancy fun on the corners. Mr. Rumbelow had come up unnoticed. I've been hearing about this, he said grimly. Trying to drive on 2 wheels instead of 4. What do you think you are, a motorbike? Cars, my dear Fiona, have 4 wheels, and the 4 wheels are for driving on all the time. You will find that you have more stability and more power when you use them properly. Now, no more nonsense. But Mr. Rumbelow wasn't too cross with Fiona. He knew that she'd only been foolish and carried away with excitement. We'll soon have you right again, said Bert cheerily. Smart as a new pin for that christening tomorrow. So that's the story. I suppose it's a trap we all fall into at some time or another, not keeping a balance and putting extra strain and wear and tear on just part of us instead of sharing it out.